Indonesia is a vast country in Southeast Asia, inhabited by 252 million people. Indonesia was inhabited by the Java man, Homo erectus, around 1.5 million years ago. Austronesian people, who make up the majority of the Indonesian population, migrated from Taiwan to Indonesia in 2000 BCE, pushing the indigenous Melanesian people to eastern parts of Indonesia. Towns, villages, and kingdoms began forming in the 1st century BC, around the same time of the start of the commencement of trade with Chinese and Indian kingdoms. The religion of Islam started spreading into Indonesia around the 13th century, leading Indonesia to have the largest Muslim population in the world as of today. According to the Quran, Islam means to completely submit to and abide by the commandments and will of the one and only God, or Allah. Although Allah is the Islamic name for God, Allah is not unique to Muslims, but is considered the creator of all creatures. A major part of the Islamic religion are the 5 pillars. They are basic acts considered mandatory by believers and play roles in daily Muslim life. The 5 pillars are Shahada, or testify, Salah, or prayer, Siyam, or fasting, Zakat, or charity, and Hajj, or the pilgrimage to Mecca, required once in a lifetime.
Islam spread into Indonesia around the 13th century by the commercial trade routes coming from the Middle East into Indonesia and the Malay Peninsula. Merchants from the Persian Gulf landed on Java and Sumatra and settled and intermarried with the people of the region. The Arabs brought schools of fiqh, Islamic schools, to Indonesia, instilling Islam into the brains and hearts of the children. At this point, Islam was still not a major religion of Indonesia. However, once Islam went through a major transformation in Southeast Asia, making the religion focus more on spirituality rather than rituals, Islam spread like a wildfire throughout the Indonesian islands. Along with the basic tenets of Islam, Indonesia contains many aspects of the religion that are unique to their country. In comparison to Saudi Arabia, a country of strict Sufi Muslims, Indonesia has religious freedom and people freely and happily practice the Islamic religion. Despite the enormous percentage of Muslims living in Indonesia, the Indonesian government remains secular and democratic with strong Islamic influences. Many other countries with Muslim majorities run as Islamic republics or monarchies. Although there is a huge group of people that identify themselves as Muslim, Islam in Indonesia and its influence to the Indonesians vary from island to island. As the earliest Indonesians were animists who practiced ancestor and spirit worship, Islam has influence from the ancient culture. From 1300 AD, Hindu and Buddhist faiths made their way to Indonesia mostly through traders and merchants from India and greatly influenced the country, especially the western islands. Also, Indonesian Islam is influenced by Sufi holy men, devout Muslims focused on their spirituality. However, just as there are many branches of Christianity or any other religion, there is no final form of Islam. Islam is still developing today, and modern-day culture is a fusion of cultural aspects from Arabic, Chinese, Malay, and European sources.
Having 88% of your population being Muslim has a huge effect on the everyday life of the citizens in Indonesia. Wearing a hijab, or as Indonesian people call it, a jilbab, is completely optional for Muslims in Indonesia. In the recent years, the amount of women wearing hijabs in Indonesia has increased greatly. Most public schools in Indonesia have remained secular. However, there are many Islamic boarding schools, called pesantren schools, which are run by Islamic scholars. Also, the food consumed by Indonesians is greatly influenced by Muslim tradition. Traditional Islamic Indonesian food include lontong, rice and coconut gravy, rendang, beef and coconut gravy, and soto mie, cabbage and noodles and chicken broth. The Indonesian government is completely secular but is highly influenced by Islam. Indonesia currently has a unitary presidential constitutional republic, which is a democratic government that practices free and equal elections. People in Indonesia are not required to abide by Sharia law. However, many strict Islamic groups, some of them political, argue for the establishment of an Islamic country. Despite these arguments, it is highly unlikely that Sharia law will ever be implemented because the majority of Muslims are considered Islam KTP, which means in name only. Since Indonesia requires an identification card that includes religion, and Indonesia has a significant population of non-Muslims, many people put Islam down as their religion, despite the fact that they do not actually practice it. The implementation of Sharia law would anger these citizens. It is also highly unlikely that Indonesia will ever become an Islamic state because political parties that have run on a pro-Islamic state platform have never gained popular majority. Terrorism is one of the largest problems facing the Indonesian government. Because of previous oppression by the national government and anger over Western influence, terror groups have greatly expanded over the last century. The majority of terror organizations currently in Indonesia have their roots in Middle Eastern terror groups. In the 1800s, Wahhabism, which is a strict interpretation of Islam, became influential in the Middle East as it was transported to Indonesia by Islamic pilgrims traveling from Mecca to Indonesia. It is the basis for the ideologies of modern terrorist organizations in Indonesia. Over time, these ideologies manifested themselves in the Indonesian radicals and led to the creation of Islamic organizations. Currently, Indonesia faces terror threats from three major groups: the Majelis Mujahidin Indonesia, Front Pembela Islam, and Jemaah Islamiyah. With the help of the US and Australia, Indonesia has successfully been combating these groups and have decreased the number of terror attacks in the nation.